My GoPro camera that I have mounted on the front of my surfboard, that's a picture of me as I'm exiting a state of flow and about to enter a state of hypothermia because it's cold in the Pacific Ocean. And I spend my weekends surfing little tiny waves and trying to stay afloat and not drown. And then I go to the work, and there I'm surfing big waves of data and trying to stay afloat. And I think that one of the things we're missing when we present data is the power of priming the mind. A very simple technique, but a powerful technique, is to not just make the data tell a story, but to leave them with a visual metaphor. Because a visual metaphor is so much more powerful. People will remember it, they can tell it to others, they can share it more quickly with others. And when you prime the mind, you get them ready to accept information. So if I talk about cups and goblets, and I show you that image, you're going to probably see a chalice. But if I talk about couples and kissing, maybe suddenly now the mind says, I'm ready to see two faces coming intimately close to one another. So I'm going to give you just a couple quick examples of how I like to share data. And before I do, I set up how you should be thinking about the data. That's a picture of Fonzie. He's about to jump the shark. How many are familiar with that concept? Right? So now when I go ahead and I show a very boring bar chart, nothing fancy, nothing exciting about it, but hopefully what it leaves them is with the main insight, which is, wow, from a ratings perspective at least, these two shows have likely jumped the shark. They may not remember 38% or 36%, but they can remember the concept of what happened. Another example of that is one of the things that we grapple with at the Disney ABC television group is as we add new platforms of viewing, what happens to the old platforms of viewing? And I could start off with a very complicated stack bar that shows, well, when you add in VOD and when you add in the tablets and you add in Hulu, this is what happens to your online viewing. But instead, I like to start off with a very simple visual metaphor. You've got the hamburger, it becomes a cheeseburger, and now you've got the big fixins on top of it. And in fact, that's exactly what we've been seeing when we look at our data. When we look at our abc.com platform, over the years, from 2009 to 2012, the patty basically stays about the same. But what we've done is we've added those extra fixings on top of what was already being viewed. They're not going to remember the exact thickness of the slices, and they're not going to remember all the pieces, but hopefully they walk away and they can remember, oh, right, cheeseburger piled high with all the fixings on top. One of the tasks I had at Disney was to go around the different business units and talk about the macro trends that are going to face us by the year 2020. Think ahead 5, 10, 15 years in advance. What is the world going to look like? And I needed an overarching theme in which they could place the data that I'm going to give them. And the theme I chose was one of shifting gears. How many of you, and I know as every year goes by there's fewer and fewer, but how many of you have ever driven a stick shift before? Yay, all right. And how many of you, the first time you drove a stick shift, stalled the vehicle? Everyone, I hope. Yes. This is actually, I bought my first car. It was a 1971 Carnegie. I bought it used for $600, and I drove it the 3 miles back to my home because I had walked literally to the home to buy it from some distant neighbors. And I stalled that multiple times. But I discovered as I got going and got closer to home and had a little bit of practice, I was really good at getting into first gear. But then I was afraid to shift into second gear because first gear was working for me. I was making progress. I was moving towards my goal. But as I looked out the window, I saw that the rest of the world was literally passing me by. They were in an optimal gear that was servicing them much better, and I was being left behind. And what was leaving me behind was my fear to let go of what was working, to embrace what was new and what was different, and the danger that I might face if I don't make that shift. And so I talked about a number of trends with the business units. One of them was talking about shifting gears around ethnic composition. Now, I don't expect them to remember the exact ethnographic breakdown of the audience. What I hope they'll remember is this concept that as you get new information, you have to decide when is it right to leave the gear behind that was working and embrace the gear that's ahead. And finally, I was trying to get across the concept to a number of different entities within Disney, this idea that the past is less meaningful, that the present is arriving faster and faster, that the future is now on an accelerated track. And there's a simple exercise, and at the risk of having people at this late hour close their eyes, I'm going to ask you to do exactly that, though. I'm going to do it, too. I'll stand still. Close your eyes for a moment, and imagine that you are on a road that winds around the side of a mountain. And somebody has blocked out the windshield. And you have to navigate down this windy road. It's a parked car right now. And all you have are the rear view mirrors. Well, it turns out if you go 2-3 miles an hour, you're creeping along, and you look out those rear view mirrors, you can see in the back of you, oh, right, yeah, the road is going towards the left. I better steer towards the right. Or, oh, it's going to the right. I better steer towards the left. You can actually navigate looking in your rear view mirror, which represents past information, to move forward. Now imagine going not 2 or 3 miles an hour, but 30 or 40 miles an hour, or 60 miles an hour. So open your eyes, because you all would be in a ravine by this point. You can't navigate that road using those rear view mirrors anymore. The information you're seeing in the back is not relevant enough to help you move forward. You'd be better off forgetting the rear view mirrors and just looking out the side, and at least looking at the present and trying to understand what's going on in the present. And to give people an indication of how the future is arriving, there's this really complicated and interesting graph. It actually comes from Ray Kurzweiler, who's a futurist, and it takes a look at Moore's law. Basically, how much processing power can you buy for $1,000 in constant US dollars? And it turns out that in 1979, the year I graduated, you could get the Apple II, and if you compared its processing power to a biological entity, it had about the same brain processing power as a bacterium. It's not a very smart computer, but smarter than the average college student in terms of processing stuff. And then by 2000, you could get a Power Mac G4, and that was about as smart as a nematode worm. So it's getting smarter. And right now, you can go out for $1,000, you can buy a computer that's about as smart as a mouse. So we went from a bacterium to a nematode worm to a mouse. So our computers are getting smarter, but it doesn't seem like they're getting that much smarter. But you go forward another 10 years, and suddenly you're able for $1,000, you go down to Sam's Club, Walmart. I want to plug them because I know Nielsen has them as a client. You go down there, $1,000, you can get a computer as smart as a human brain, at least in terms of processing power. So the difference from a lizard and a nematode worm to a mouse versus a mouse to a human is huge, but it's the same exponential curve. I don't expect, as I brought this information to light to the business units, that they're going to remember all of that. What I hope they'll remember is that the law of accelerated change means that things are happening so fast, so radically, that in fact you have to stop using rear view mirrors that looked at past data, and you have to start looking at the future. You have to look at the present and what is happening right in front of their eyes. And so very quickly, because it's the end of the day, and I'll know that this worked or not when I see you all tomorrow and you come up to me, and if you're able to say, yeah, jump the shark. You were talking about data about shows declining in ratings. And, oh, right, the fully stacked cheeseburger with all the fixings. That's about how when you add new platforms of viewing, you actually aren't stealing from the patty, you're actually adding to it, and there's more viewing going on. All right, the Karmann Ghia, your first car. And that's all about shifting gears, having the courage and knowing when to leave one gear, one way of thinking, and going into another realm of thinking. And finally, that the rear view mirror of looking at past data isn't as powerful and important now because change is happening so quickly, we actually have to look more to the present. And ultimately, if you come up to me and say, yeah, you're the doofus surfer guy falling off the board, I'll know that I had an impact. And with that, I just want to say this is a simple, old school concept. It doesn't require any extra technology. It requires mental effort to sit down and find the story in the data. And then don't tell the story with the data. Tell the story with a visual metaphor. Use the data to confirm that the story is real. Thank you very much.